Okay. Everything has been going off without a hitch, so we needed some little challenge here, right? Well, first of all, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. And before I start, I just want to say we do have simultaneous translation, and that the panel is going to be webcasted through the Global Affairs Canada Facebook page. And we do have an official photographer, I think, roaming around. So if anyone does not want to be photographed, please let one of us know. Also, we do have, I think, an evaluation form that's on your seats, and we'd love it if you just take a moment to fill it out and hand it into the registration desk, because we would love your feedback. So I just want to start today off by acknowledging that we are on the traditional territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people, and we are so thrilled to be able to meet here. We are grateful to so many of the Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and that we have the opportunity to meet on this territory. Nous avons le privilège d'avoir avec nous un groupe remarquable de...
We have quite an incredible group of panelists, young leaders and representatives of Global Affairs Canada and civil society. I would like to note the presence of Madame Kawinzi Miu, who is Directress for the food program with the United Nations. I would like to also note that we have with us Assistant Deputy Ministers, Madame Caroline Leclerc and Madame Elisa Gobert, and we also have the Directors General Amy Baker and Madame Louise Holt, who are furnishing incredible efforts for the Feminist International Aid Policy of Canada.
Great International Development Week. Yay! And really the incredible work being done alongside communities around the world to build a better future for all. And we're also here to celebrate that Canada, with its new Feminist International Assistance Policy, I don't know if we can still call it new, has really proudly taken up the mantle of gender equality at the global stage. And I think this leadership comes at a really pivotal moment when in some parts of the world we are witnessing a retreat on women and girls' rights and a silencing of their voices. So we are here to gather and celebrate the on-the-ground impact and policy that is already having impact on the lives of thousands of women and girls around the world. And lastly, but more importantly, we are here to celebrate the innate power and potential of girls and women around the globe. We're also going to explore how we can and must not only celebrate, but amplify and support voices of all women and girls. We're also here to talk about the Me Too movement. Who has heard of that? Which has really opened up a new space where girls and women can share their experiences, their stories that have oftentimes been silenced. And we can have a new space where we're able to have a frank, but sometimes painful discussion, but crucial conversation about unequal power dynamics and abuse. And these conversations are really a first step in creating lasting change. This is why the Me Too movement was and continues to be so powerful, because at its core, it is a movement about gender inequality and the myriad of ways it seeps into and shapes our everyday lives. And it strikes a chord because everyone in this room has been impacted by this issue. And it strikes a chord because I think it's fair to say that gender equality is really the social and political issue of our time. So we're not just going to focus on the problem today, but we're actually going to explore real, proven solutions to addressing gender inequality. Plan International has over 80 years of experience in international development, and we've learned that it is critical to address inequality to build brighter and better futures. And ultimately, the root is gender inequality that is challenging the issue that oftentimes plagues so many girls, in that they are worth less than boys. This summer, I was chatting with a Plan colleague, and he told me about a conversation he had with a girl from Uganda who explained to him that the parents favors boys, and that having a girl child is considered a curse. And that if you actually start a journey and you're walking on that journey and the first person you see As a girl, your journey is considered cursed, and you have to turn back and restart your journey. And this is the social position that so many girls occupy, a position of a curse. And so we could help this girl by opening a local school. We know that education plays a critical role. We could provide teachers to help improve her education. But if the girl is not safe from physical violence on her way to school, if there's no toilets there for her, she will learn to struggle and she will never truly thrive. She will continue to be devalued and discriminated against simply because she's a girl. So we need to work together, not just to change the condition in which she lives, but really to change her position within society and take what we call at Plan a gender transformative approach. We have to bring boys and men into the conversation, not simply as allies, but really allow them to become much more than that. They must be battling the same sexism and gender-based violence right alongside women and girls, not benevolent observers from the sidelines. They must have their own stake in the struggle, and not just because they have a sister or a mother. The good news is that already much of this work is taking place on the ground, and the results are inspiring. In partnership with the Canadian government, Plan is integrating this gender transformative approach into our sexual and reproductive health and rights work, our maternal and newborn child and health programming as well. Dans ces communautés, nous commençons à voir une
In these communities, we're starting to see an improvement for the use of critical services for sexual and reproductive health. And we've able to see a fundamental change in perceptions, attitudes, and the behavior of men and women towards men and boys towards women and girls. This is important. We've seen that there's been a change of leadership, and the participation of women in decision-making has increased. And not only within communities and within health establishments, but also within families. For girls, this is a vital change in their daily life, and this is an essential change which will help them to liberate their power and will help them to defend their rights.
In their daily lives that is critical to unlocking their inherent agency and fight to be able to realize their rights. And that's what is exciting about this approach, is that it recognizes adolescent girls and boys for themselves as they hold power to change social norms. So rather than wait for governments or other actors to take the lead, they have the agency to reject what they've inherited, which could be sexism, racism, and pass on something new, which is equality. So today, we are thrilled that we are going to hear examples of how Canadian civil society is working alongside the federal government and local partners to be able to make this approach work on the ground. And our goal is really a world where men and women, girls and boys can enjoy power with each other rather than over each other. And where everyone can draw strength from the power within themselves. And we are thrilled that the Government of Canada is supporting so many of us here in this endeavor. It is now my privilege to be able to introduce Parliamentary Secretary to Ministre Marie-Claude Bibeau, Selina César-Chavannes. She is just a fantastic champion for the work that we do, and we are thrilled to be able to have her here today. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me this morning, and I really would like to thank you for that warm introduction. I'd first like to thank Plan Canada for hosting this event with Global Affairs Canada, and to welcome all of our department partners who are here today. You do such important work, and I don't think we often enough get an opportunity to say thank you to you for the work that you do on the ground each and every day. And so I am going to take this opportunity to say thank you now. The theme for this year's International Development Week is Partners for a Better World. and it invites all Canadians to get involved in building a peaceful, more inclusive, and prosperous world. And if we haven't learned already through Agenda 2030 and the Sustainable Development Goals, how each of them are interconnected and how we as well in our approach to dealing with the SDGs need to be interconnected and work together, I think something got lost along the way. We need to be doing that. We need to be working together and doing things a lot differently, a little bit more innovatively, to be able to tackle a lot of the world's greatest challenges. So, of course, as mentioned, we saw recently the capacity to work together in the Me Too and Time's Up campaigns. It demonstrated really a shift toward gender equality, and a really powerful one too. But it is important to note, especially in the context of Me Too and Time's Up, that gender equality cannot be achieved, as mentioned, in isolation, just with working with women and girls. It has to be with men and boys becoming engaged. And over the last couple of months, I did a YouTube video. I do a lot of videos with my son. And he really wanted me to do this video talking about boys' colors and girls' colors. And so at that point, I just said, okay, Johnny, let's do this video. And he really articulated the fact at 9 years old that there's no such thing as boys' colors and girls' colors. And so the importance of getting boys and men, as young as they are, as old as they are, connected into this conversation is critically important. Not only because they can be allies, but because often they are victims. And it's times that we, like with these movements, that we could forget that young boys are also impacted by the Me Too movement. So that's critically important to remember. It is heartening, though, for me to see women using social media platforms to speak up about their rights and dignity. This tide of women's voices is being heard, and it's not going away. And it's not just happening in North America and in Europe. My challenge to the world is to see Me Too and Time's Up in a holistic context. It is about sexual assault, but it's also about removing harmful social behaviors and barriers which eliminate choice. So globally, more than 15 million girls are married before they turn 18. Me Too, Time's Up. 225 million women don't have access to contraceptive methods of their choice. Me Too, Time's Up. As a result, more than 25 million women and adolescent girls have unsafe abortions every year, an unacceptable and avoidable outcome. Me Too, time is up. 200 million women and girls are subject to the practice of female genital mutilation worldwide. Me Too, time's up. Early child and forced marriage and gender-based violence is still rampant worldwide. Me Too, time's up. We know that legal and social barriers discriminate against women need to be eliminated in order for women to become those remarkable agents of change. Women need to have access to opportunity and assets, including capital. If they do, they tend to marry later, provide better health and nutrition for their families, and earn more income than women who didn't go to school. And Canada is fully committed to advancing gender equality and preventing sexual and gender-based violence here in Canada and in developing countries as well. We know that the most effective way to eradicate poverty is by working with women and girls, and that is why they are central components of our feminist international assistance policy. We cannot, and we've heard Minister Bibeau say this a number of times, we cannot eradicate poverty. We cannot make the world a better place if we leave 50% of our population behind. The conversations that we are having today will be an opportunity to demonstrate how important sexual and reproductive health and rights are to realizing the rights of women and girls. We now have evidence to prove that when women and girls have access to health services and understand their sexual and reproductive rights, they are more likely to stay in school, and they can help contribute to their communities and their countries. And not only that, the McKinsey report also showed and demonstrated that when they are able to reach their full potential worldwide, it is a $12 to $28 trillion injection into our global economy. That should be evidence enough for most of us to make the change that is required. Recently, our Prime Minister has made a couple of very important announcements. One was last March, when he committed $650 million to sexual and reproductive health and rights. And the other was more recently, when he announced that Canada was doubling its contribution to the Global Partnership for Education. Because we all believe, and he believes, that empowering women and girls is essential, and that education is crucial to giving women a say in the decisions that shape their lives, giving them that choice. And what a great opportunity it is for us to be here today with many young people who are in this room. Champions for change, champions for something that is much better and greater than themselves. We recently announced that the government was investing we recently announced that the Government of Canada was investing in a couple of different programs. One related to, international Aboriginal youth internships, and one related to international youth internship programs. I'm hoping that some of the young people in this room take advantage of those very good programs. I again want to thank each and every one of you for being here today. I know that we can count on you to make the change that we need for the type of world that we want today and in the future. And I very much look forward to the conversation that we are going to have. Thank you very much. I would now like to take a moment to introduce our youth moderator for this morning, Matlin Shaheen.
Hello? Okay, there we go. So I'd just like to take a moment to introduce our panelists. Of course, we are lucky to have the CEO of Plan Canada, Caroline Risbaro, and Selena, who's the Parliamentary Secretary for International Development and La Francophonie, and the MP for Whitby. We also have Jess Tomlin, who's the CEO and President of the Match International Women's Fund. Prior to the Match Fund, she worked with refugee and women's issues with the UN, the World Bank, and CARE Canada. We also have two wonderful youth ambassadors here from Plan. We have Aaliyah, who's a fourth-year student at McGill University studying international development and political science. And we have Natasha, who's a fourth-year student at the University of Ottawa studying international development and women's studies. And my name is Maitland, and I'm a student at the University of Ottawa. And I'm lucky to work with Natasha at our Champions of Change Club at U Ottawa, which supports Plan's Because I'm a Girl program. As a young woman, I feel incredibly fortunate to receive an education and to practice my free and human rights every day. Today, we're going to hear stories about women who don't have these rights and who are fighting against child marriage and lack of sexual and reproductive rights, among many other barriers. These issues disproportionately affect women and girls and prevent them from receiving an education and living a fair life. Our hope today is to understand these issues both from a policy and developmental perspective from Caroline, Selena, and Jess, and as well from the perspective of young women such as Aaliyah and Natasha. And lastly, I'd like to introduce my co-moderator, who's Caroline Leclerc. She's the Assistant Deputy Minister of Partnerships for Development Innovation at Global Affairs Canada.
Well, hello, everyone. Good morning. Thank you very much for being here.
And my job will be to, I'll tell you about the format of the panel, how that will work today, and I'll make sure that we're on time. And I'm not really doing that. Anna is doing that for me and making all sorts of signs, and then I sort of pretend that I know what I'm doing. I want to start by talking about International Development Week. Donc, le Premier Ministre,
We have, on the 4th of February, the Prime Minister put out a communique to let us know about international, this week for international development, and I'm going to be doing this right through. It's for the 4th to the 10th, so I will continue to support that. So we want to celebrate this moment where we can celebrate the contribution of all Canadians to international development, and this contribution is enormous. We really do make an important difference in the field, but that's not all. The second objective of this week for international development is to get Canadians involved.
An opportunity for us to have conversations about important issues in development, to come together, to learn, to find solutions, and then to be engaged and to act. So that's what we're trying to achieve today. And in the spirit of Partners for a Better World, all of us together, government, civil society organizations, youth, community, individuals, we're going to have this conversation around gender equality, because we know that when women get to fully exercise their rights, they're really powerful agents of change. They make the economy better. They make peace and security better. They make their families and their communities better. So we do know that achieving gender equality is the smart thing to do, is the right thing to do. And I know you heard the PM say that, but actually he stole the line from me. Yeah. So how this is going to go today, we're going to initially talk about two quite significant obstacles to gender equality: sexual and reproductive health and rights for adolescent girls, and child early and forced marriage. And how we're going to do that is that Maitland and I are going to ask questions of the panel to get the ball rolling, and we're going to discuss each topic for about 15 minutes. After that, we'll go to you, and then we hope we can have an interactive discussion. You can ask questions of the panelists. There'll be mics in the room, but we also distributed cards. If you prefer to write your question, there'll be people going around to collect them and to read them for you. So this is how this is going to go. And to get us started on our first topic, which is sexual reproductive health and rights, and maybe let me give you a bit of a sense of what we're talking about here. Quand on parle de la santé et des droits en matière de sexualité.
When we talk about the sexual and reproductive rights, and in French, I have to read it because it's very complicated to say and to remember. But when we talk about this subject, we're talking about a whole number of factors, which means that a woman can decide with whom they will want to have a sexual relationship, the type of protection she will want to have, and whether she wants to have an abortion in the event that she would become pregnant. So it's a very complex subject, and sometimes it's a little bit difficult to discuss. But today we will be discussing this, and we're going to start with a video that comes from Uganda, and it's a video dealing with menstruation.
I did not go back to school for 2 months due to fear of being embarrassed by boys.
Boys used to laugh at girls, they used to tease girls, but now they support girls.
They were feeling ashamed, so they were not coming to school when they're in their period.
Since this club came, they have stopped to laugh at us. because they know that menstruation is normal. It's important for girls to go to school because they will be the leaders of tomorrow.
So the first question from this topic is for Selena and Natasha. And it's a question that is relevant to Canadian women and girls as well, which is, we may receive sexual education from school, but also from our parents, our friends, or our mentors, or from the media. Especially for upcoming generations, they will likely receive more information from the internet and TV shows than anything else. So how can we make sure that the information youth receive about their sexual and reproductive health be accurate and healthy?
Thank you. Okay. So first of all, what a powerful program that is in Uganda. In the internet age, it's so important to ensure all adolescents are provided a quality and ongoing sexual and reproductive health education in school. And this is just as important for youth growing up in the global south as it is for youth here in Canada. There needs to be universal programming like we just saw in Uganda, which is more progressive than I ever received in school. I don't know about you guys. This kind of education is so important for both girls and boys in terms of learning what healthy relationships look like, consent, ending stigmas, and just realizing your basic rights. This kind of education needs to become interwoven into all school curriculums, so youth have a foundation to knowledge to combat the often harmful or inaccurate information or narratives they may see online. As well, bring the information to where the youth are on the internet. Invest in all programming that engages youth and is accessible and easily available to them. Instead of them going to Dr. Google or trusting television shows or Instagram posts, I definitely know Instagram, create trustworthy and easy to comprehend resources for them to access online. It must be accessible to the most marginalized youth. Comprehensive, break the stigma, engage both genders, and it must be youth-friendly. Because if we continue to ignore youth needs and rights to sexual education, then the isolation and misconceptions will continue.
You're here. Thank you very much for that response. And yes, that video was really profound. And I'd have to agree with you that I don't think my son will ever get a lesson like that, although he does go with his dad when he needs to buy products for myself or his sisters. So he doesn't know how to get them, he just doesn't know how to make them. So of course, I'm a mom. I'm a mom, and I have 2 girls and a son. 18, 13 are my girls, and 9-year-old is my boy. And it is very important for me as a mom to sort of have those very important and honest conversations with my kids. I found with my older 2 girls, I was brutally honest. So when my son, who is really smart, he scores in the 99.8th percentile. So he's really a smart boy, and he'd ask questions like, Mommy, did I come out of your stomach? And I was just like, oh, this is brilliant. And my daughters are going, no, don't say it, don't do it. So we really need to have these important conversations, because Dr. Google will be where he ends up searching, and that is never it shouldn't be the first point of contact. As a parliamentarian, I think we have a great opportunity to facilitate the conversation about SRHR through our leadership, through our dialogue, through our Prime Minister talking about sexual reproductive health and rights, through the Minister talking about it unapologetically, through myself and other parliamentarians talking about it, just the same way that I've demonstrated that conversation around mental health. It's one of these things that, we're not supposed to talk about. Well, why not? Why don't we have these conversations? The more we open up and have these conversations, the easier it is for the average individual to have the conversations at home. Of course, Canada supports a lot of the partners here in this room, and I did thank you earlier for the work that you do to have those conversations in your various communities right across the country. And when we think about our work internationally, of course, I mentioned the Prime Minister's $650 million announcement, but as well, a couple of days ago, Minister Bibo made a $3 million announcement around FGM. And let's talk about that. Let's say female genital mutilation. I hear that being whispered from the front. Let's talk about that. Let's have honest conversations. And the more we elevate and amplify the voices of many of these young girls who are whispering about this, the more we as parliamentarians, as senior leaders in our community talk about them, the more that those conversations could be had at a grassroots level.
Merci. Jess. Alors, Jess, dites-moi donc, quel rôle...
Jess, please tell me, what role do the links between communities in Canada and foreign communities, what do these relationships play on women and girls' rights? Je vais répondre.
I think so. Just so much that you've said, Selena. I think that is really useful to build, and I'm glad that this conversation is really framed around the Me Too movement. Like, what a moment in time we are in. We will read about this in the history books in 30 years' time. It's really exciting. Embrace it, because it didn't just happen in a vacuum, right? It has been micro actions by women's movements all over the world, and it has surged, and it has reached a tipping point. And our job is to make sure we tip it over. And so I think in the context of Canada and the world, it's like, this is a global movement. This isn't just about Canada. There are things happening in Canada every single day to shatter the patriarchy, and that is happening everywhere in the world. For somebody who does this work and has done this work for a couple of decades, I am very conscious that this is a very, very special time. And it really has the opportunity to be a unifying moment. I've just come back from Kenya and spent a week there, and I'm struck by the parallel and potentially what we have to learn from our partners around the world. So in Kenya, we have this adage, or there's this adage that they skipped the landline, right? So they have moved straight to, they just never put landlines in. They just moved straight to mobile technology. Their entire economy is now built on mobile technology. And the way in which they're now cultivating leadership, building moments, activating political discourse, managing new economies, there is so much to learn by our brothers and sisters in different parts of the world that I think can really shape how we understand Canada's role in the world. And so I would say, as much as I can wax poetic, Carolyn, about gender equality being the issue of our time, I would actually say intersectionality is the issue of our time. I think what's exciting right now is where we're moving on racial justice, on women's rights, on the LGBTQI movement, and how suddenly those movements are working together and they are powerful. And I think that that's the real tectonic shift that we are going to see. And so to draw that back into the SRHR piece, I would say there's so much that we can think about in terms of how to serve women, how to empower them so that they have agency and they are choiceful and they have the products and services and clinics and availabilities, that they're empowered to have the conversations with their families. There are so many things that we can do. My vision for the future is the moment when we're talking about women's right to pleasure, because we're still talking about her right to protect her body, to be choiceful, to manage her and space her pregnancies, but nobody's talking about her right to enjoy sex. And I think until we do, then we're not really there.
Yay. Okay. I'm with you. We could go talk about it.
Thank you, Jess. And I have a question for Aaliyah, just following up on that. In your view, what can Canadian youth do to have a positive impact on the realization of sexual and reproductive rights of women and girls, both here in Canada and internationally?
Hello? 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 Should I start?
This is the magic mic.
Yeah. Hello? Okay, that one works. So good morning, everybody. So I think first and foremost, you really need to recognize, kind of echoing what other people have already said, the global nature of many of these issues due to the fact that issues like gender inequality and like you were mentioning, like racial issues, LGBTQI issues and things like that are very systemic in nature. And so to echo what Selena was saying as well, we need to have like an interconnected approach to these issues and responding to these issues as well, because we can't respond to them in isolation, whether that be just girls or women. We need boys and girls, and also international responses to these issues as well. So in terms of what youth can do to get more involved, I think the number one thing is to have that desire to be informed. And what's been really good for me recently is I've realized that a lot of my peers in university, a lot of young people are really interested in the issues, want to learn more about these issues of gender inequality and other issues as well, and they want to find ways to be involved. I found that in many cases, seeking more ways to get involved is almost a natural progression for lots of us. Like, we want to find out how we can get more involved. And in that case, we kind of have to, be able to get informed and use our voices in public spaces. I think the fact that we're even having this event is a really good step in the right direction. Allowing youth to speak on these issues and be more informed on these issues is a great way to mobilize youth. And I think that in this way we're able to become educated about these issues, speak more openly about them. I really liked what you had to say about normalizing these conversations, speaking with our friends about it, making sure that these conversations aren't taboo, but they're being had so that we can take steps in the right direction. I also think that youth could really get involved. So alongside using your voice, you could reach out to MPs and make sure that your voice is being heard. I'm sure they would love to hear it. She's saying yes, you see. I also think that, yeah, exactly. Hit her up on Twitter. Hit me up too. No, I'm just joking. But I also think that we should get involved with NGOs. Organizations like Plan and Match do really great work. I've really loved being involved with Plan, and there are other organizations that do great work as well. But I do know that one of the pillars of what Plan does is advocating for sexual rights, and I think that's really important work. It's a great way to continue getting informed. We also need to listen to different voices that are being being voiced in these conversations. Some voices are sometimes marginalized, but I think in normalizing these conversations, the natural progression is that many voices will be amplified as well. So some other suggestions that I have for youth, I'm currently subscribed to the Global Citizen listserv, and I think that's a really great way to get involved. They give out calls to action all the time. They update you all the time on what's going on. Plan and Match, as I mentioned already, are really good ways to get involved. So I think that's a really good way, just get educated and keep having these conversations.
Anyone else on the panel wants to get in on that? Everyone was nodding, and
I just say Aaliyah for the president of the world.
Yeah. Certainly, I know when you mentioned intersectionality, I know there's global affairs people in the room that were like jumping up and down. Yes, 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 absolutely. We stand against all kinds of discrimination, so very much agree. I think following that, Caroline, you should get on and tell us a bit what you think is the sort of biggest challenge that stands in the way of allowing girls to fully exercise their sexual and reproductive health and rights. And I'd like you in the panel to project yourself in 10 or 15 years. And what is the world going to look like for adolescents if we succeed?
It's on and everything. I've never felt so incompetent. So, great question. What I would say is we have this significant moment in time where I think the world is rallying behind the issue of gender equality, intersectionality, and we have to use this moment in time not just to address sexual and reproductive health, but to do it in what I would say a gender transformative way, which is using this opportunity to help girls, women be able to exercise their sexual and reproductive rights, but do it in a way that not just changes their condition, but their social position. And that is what we really need to see. You know, I remember my first international development trip, and I went to Niger, and here I am in the middle of a desert, and I meet this woman, and I was 24 at the time. I think she was younger than me. And she had 7 children, and she had an 8th child on the way. And there was her husband, and he was smoking and drinking, and the child in her arms, she stopped feeding because she was pregnant. She didn't want to harm the child that she was carrying. And, you know, I was visiting projects at health clinics, you know, looking at clean water and wash projects. And I thought to myself, we're never going to make progress unless we allow this woman to have her rights over her own body and choice over her own children. But in order to do that, we had to change her social position because she really has no say at this point. So this is what we need to do over the next 15 years if we really want to see progress. And let me say this is not just something that needs to happen over there. This needs to happen in Canada as well. So Plan International did an interesting study. We found that 2/3 of Canadian girls still feel like their gender holds them back from their reproductive rights, from their career choices. And what was interesting is we were doing a panel with one of our Champions for Change clubs here, and we were chatting with the girls and with the boys about their sex education that they receive in schools. And the girls say, well, our sex education, this goes back to Jess, what you were talking about, is really about how do we protect ourselves? How do we make sure we don't have an unwanted pregnancy? How do we protect ourselves against violence and assault? And the boys were saying, well, you know, we're learning about how to pleasure ourselves. Like, how is this happening in Canada as well? So we need to use that opportunity to also change mores and social values here to ensure that girls are valued equally as boys. So it's not about just changing condition, it's about social position.
Thanks, Caroline. Does anyone want to quickly add on that before we move on to the next topic?
Jumping in either on that, and just to build on that as well, I think in 15 years what would be a great victory for the intersectionality piece is to break the status quo in terms of marginalized women of color, disabled, different sexual orientation, religious minorities on boards, in political spheres, in decision-making arenas. Right now, globally, they're less than 5%. Never mind trying to get to 50% gender equity. Like, the most vulnerable of us keep staying in these very, very single-digit percentages, and that needs to stop. So those barriers to success, those harmful social norms, those systemic barriers that exist in institutions that are not just happening over there where there's harmful social norms, but right here where there's systemic barriers to our success, need to be removed. And that could only happen with, one, a continued conversation around the raising of consciousness of individuals around their biases and around the systemic issues, but two, amplifying voices of individuals who are often too afraid to say things that need to be said. And that, for me, is something that we are in the throngs of right now, and it needs to change in order for every person, every young person in here, male or female, to reach ultimate success. Because it doesn't happen if just the girls move, and then we still have the barriers in place.
Thank you. So we're going to move to the second topic, which is child early and forced marriage. So we're going to watch a quick video.
ছিল কিছু চাকরি বাকরি করব আমি স্কুলের শিক্ষক শিক্ষিকা সেই সময় ভালো লাগে নাই তাছাড়া সব স্বাধীনতা দেখতেছি নষ্ট হয়ে যাবে বান্ধবীদের সাথে কথা বলা যাবে না আরও লেখাপড়া ভালোভাবে শিখতে পারবো না তাছাড়া মানে আমাদের স্বাধীনতা তো নষ্ট হয়ে যাবে যদি আমার বিয়ে হয়ে যায় এরকম লাগছিল মানে খুব খারাপ লাগছিল সবার সাথে হাসি চলা যাবে না
So my first question is for our youth on the panel today. As young women, what does life free of child marriage mean to you, and why do you think we should be focusing on eliminating child marriage?
Sure. So every 2 seconds, a girl under the age of 18 is forced into marriage. My grandmother in Lebanon was one of those girls. A life free of child marriage means that children can be children. It means a life without poverty, without hunger, increased safety for girls, improved maternal health, a life of education, a life of girls breaking out of the cycle. They would be able to flourish and exercise their rights. When child marriage is eliminated, it allows for the multiple barriers in the communities that they face to be lifted. Quite simply, I think if we want to achieve the Agenda 2030, eliminating child marriage is the key. Girls would be in control of their own destiny, and the destiny of their future children and their community members would be brighter. These are our sisters, and we have a responsibility to them to ensure that they can be free of this oppression. So I say to the government, continue allocating funding towards programs that support an end to child marriage. Continue advocating and advancing these girls' rights.
Thank you for that. Caroline, back to you. Am I on? Yeah? Okay. Oh, sorry. I interrupted. I apologize. I don't think this one works.
Hello? Okay. Yeah, exactly. So to put it simply, I would say that a life free of child marriage really just means a life full of opportunities. To kind of echo what Natasha was saying, children should have a right to be children, boys and girls and men and women should have equal opportunities. And I feel like, when you're forced into marriage at a young age, you're not able to explore whatever your desires and interests are, whatever those may be. And you should have the choice to be able to explore those and the opportunity to. I also think that as a child, you shouldn't be forced to make adult decisions. I can't even make adult decisions, and I am an adult, I guess, and I don't think that you should be forced to do that when you're a child, especially when your voices aren't being heard. How can you exercise your agency? How can you, debate for things such as like sexual and reproductive health and rights and things like that? Like you don't have the same agency, you don't have the same ability to speak up about the things that are important to you and that are affecting you. So a young girl who's not able to exercise her voice and have her voice heard is, at a disadvantage, and it stops her from exploring what she could do. And, Selena mentioned at the beginning a lot of stats about how much, a large amount of money that, could be made if we just used girls in our, 50% of our population. Like these girls can be really essential not only to making change, but she could really like affect her own life and affect a whole bunch of other lives if we give her the opportunity to. So I think having these opportunities is really important.
Okay, sorry again for jumping in. Thank you for that, Caroline. Je voulais vous demander.
I'd like to ask you, so based on your experience, what are the key factors that could lead to good results for reducing youth marriage? And what can the role of mobilization do?
So a couple of things. I mean, you saw some of the results there from Plan. I mean, I think in tackling child early and forced marriage, it is a very complex issue to deal with. And so the way we really deal with it is we really look at touching all levels of duty bearers. So taking a rights-based approach, looking at the rights holder, but then trying to address the duty bearers, whether it's at the family level, at the institutional level, the moral duty bearers, so some of the religious or community leaders, and really trying to change perceptions around child early and forced marriage. And you have to work at all those levels if you're going to be successful. So, Plan has been successful in working at communities. We've helped to change laws in different countries to ban child early and forced marriage. But that being said, we also recognize that every year 15 million girls experience early child forced marriage. So we also work with those girls who perhaps have had children to try and get them back into school. So it's about also working with those who have unfortunately undergone a child or early forced marriage. The other thing I will say is that a comprehensive approach has to be taken. So I was in El Salvador not too long ago, and in El Salvador, 30% of births are girls under 18. And what's interesting is that they actually don't even know the average age because they don't even have the data collected to be able to understand the average age. But we were hearing from some of the staff there that it's 13, 14. And as a girl, you really don't have any options in El Salvador except to hopefully find a partner who will take care of you. And oftentimes the girls feel forced into these roles to have children early. So we were working with a group of girls in a few communities, and we were looking at trying to address early and forced marriage. We were looking to address education. We were looking to address sexual and reproductive health. We were also trying to find economic opportunities for them as well, because it's also about being able to find gainful employment to be able to support yourself once you do get that education. So you can see all these levels of complexity. And because we took this comprehensive approach, in the areas where we were working, we reduced that number from 30% to 0. And this is where I think we have to be able to recognize this issue is very complex. It's at multi-levels, and we have to come up with these comprehensive approaches, move away from that siloed approach, which we've sometimes taken in development, whether it's kind of been focus on health, focus on nutrition, focus on education, and all of those are really, really important. But if we're going to achieve the aspirations of the SDGs, we have to look at the intersectionality between all of those to be able to achieve those kind of results.
Thank you. My last question is for Selena. So an important aspect to ending young marriage is to ensure parents and community leaders see girls as equal to boys and deserving of the same opportunities in life? How can we make them see that education is a healthier and more sustainable option for their girls, but one that will provide them with the same financial stability as marriage?
So we first need to make them see that financial stability does not equal marriage all the time, right? Because there are cases where, after they are married, if their partner no longer needs them, they throw them out. So there is no stability with marriage. Not here or anywhere else. There's no stability with marriage. Girls, I'm married to a great guy, but there's no stability. The education is foundational. You do need to have that. But I will talk more specifically about the three things that I think Minister Bibeau has mentioned a number of times in terms of the need for resources, the need for good policy, and the need for leadership. And all of these and the number of different things that we're talking about here have a role to play. So I mentioned that last year the Prime Minister announced $650 million for sexual reproductive health and rights. And part of that money, one of the tangible benefits of that is funding going to a Plan Canada initiative called Plan for Girls, which supports young girls so that they can decide when and to whom they marry. So you have the resources there going into a policy that looks at the local context, that utilizes and leverages the strengths of our partners in order to be able to make the best outcome on the ground for individuals. But I think the most important component of this, so in that little triangle of resources, policy, and leadership, and having our partners in the middle of that, is that leadership piece. And it's not something that's, one arrow goes there, the arrows are going all over the place and they're going through and around. But that leadership piece, the leadership piece is critically important. And I think the organizations in this room know that more than ever, because the feminist international assistance policy that we are lauded for around the world is yours. We listened, right? We listened to what you wanted. And therefore, within that policy came out a very feminist approach to how we do things, listening to local context. So we are not afraid to talk about SRHR, or female genital mutilation, or child and early forced marriage, because we know that we have a legion of organizations behind us saying this is the way to go. This is what we should be doing. This is what we need to talk about. This is what is affecting and impacting people on the ground. So in as much as we are, have these big microphones all the time and people want to give us microphones, it is your voice. It is your voice through the actions and the voices of women and girls on the ground that allowed us to be able to put forward policy and have the leadership and have the resources dedicated to fighting things like child, early, and forced marriage.
I'll riff a little off the leadership piece because I think it is really, really important. And so maybe a little bit about the Match Fund. So we're a foundation, and we invest in grassroots women's rights organizations around the world. And our recipe for what we do is we invest in local leadership. So we invest in women's rights organizations who are building feminist movements in their countries, who have the most to lose and the most to gain when things go bad or things go right. And I think what we're seeing now is this really powerful leadership, and we're seeing these women's movements being built all over the world, and those movements are being led by local actors in their community, and they are the designers of the change. One of the organizations we support, again, Kenya is in my mind and in my heart right now, but it's an organization that teaches girls to box. in the slums of Mathare and Kibera and elsewhere in the city as well as in rural areas. And you'd think, okay, well, that's not transformative. I mean, that's gonna shatter some assumptions about what women are capable of, but it's not going to, really change the way the future. It's not transformative necessarily, but it is, because these girls are coming in, all of whom have survived sexual violence. They're learning to find strength and truth in their stance, but they're also being taken out of the communities and brought together amongst each other. And it's in those spaces, those quiet spaces, in their local languages, with their sisters and with their mentors, that they're talking about rape, they're talking about early forced marriage, they're talking about how to get home safely and how to navigate difficult conversations with their parents about why they should stay in school. And it was really powerful to see these girls transition from telling me about what is a powerful boxing stance, and they took the boxing stance, and I was trying to do it, and I was a hot mess. But it was really wonderful, and they said, but you know what this teaches me about my life? This teaches me that I need to stand firm. That it's okay to stand firm in my decisions. It means I need to be nimble. It means I need to move. Sometimes I need to protect myself, and it means sometimes I need to move forward and do the jab. And it was all of this work that they were doing, because there is no map, right? The world is just getting more complex and more political and more difficult, and poverty is on the rise. And so cultivating that resilience and that capability to navigate the roadmap that they are going to be going through, and that local leadership is really critical.
Thank you for that. I believe we've reached the end of the two segments with the panel, and I think at this point the live stream will be off. So let's say a little farewell at everyone.